Okay, I think we'll get started. So welcome to the Helix webinar series. This session is an Ask the Expert session, so it's Helix Data Manager. First of all, we're doing quite a lot of these Ask the Expert sessions. The setup is a little bit different to the webinars. We don't actually prepare per se content, but we are asking you to come forward with some questions. We didn't actually have any questions pre this event, so if we do go into this as a live Q&A discussion, please have a think about the type of questions that you might want to ask the panel of experts. Just a few reminders for those that haven't used Zoom before. At the bottom, you should see the Q&A section. You're welcome to put your questions in there and we will take them to the live discussion. You can also raise your hand and we will unmute you or ask you to unmute yourself. We will be sharing a few little tips from the past webinar series that we've done around Helix Data Manager. And we will share any links that come from today. They will go out with the Q&A post-event. So let's get started. So first of all, my name is Samantha Hudson dos Santos Figueira. I work as a program manager at BMC. My role is to help with self-solve content, producing content out for customers in particular, and it will go across the whole of the product space. So you may have come to some of the webinars or other Ask the Expert sessions. So this is very much a session that's interactive. So we would ask you to come with lots of questions. The more interactive, the better. And it does help us in the future to produce more content. So I'm now going to hand over to my co-host, Smita, if you can introduce yourself, and then we'll go through the rest of the panel.
Thank you, Sam. Hello, everyone. My name is Smita, and I'm a principal technical analyst here at BMC. I'm currently part of the onboarding technical team supporting the Helix SaaS customers. So I welcome you all for today's session. Thank you so much. I'll pass it on to Ollie.
Smita. Hi folks, I'm Ollie. I am a senior architect at BMC and have been working with the Helix Data Manager and the predecessor, which was CMT, for about the last 6 years, just over 6 years now. So hopefully I'll have some challenging questions that we can discuss on the call today. Thanks very much. I'll pass it on to Murali.
Hi everyone, Murali Vishwanathan here. I'm a solution architect as part of the engineering team. We're an extended team. We call ourselves SEAL team, but closely associated with engineering and R&D. Nice to be here today to answer any of your questions. I'll pass it on to Bhavesh.
Hello everyone, this is Bhavesh. I'm a lead product manager working with BMC, and I'm the product manager taking care of HDM, and I'm also one of the product managers leading the Helix Innovation Suite and Helix Operations Manager. I'll pass it on to Sam.
To me, I've already done my intro. Is Anita there? Just if we can have Anita introduce herself. She's still on. Don't know if we've lost her. Let me ask Balaji, can you introduce yourself? Can you hear us okay?
Hi, can you hear me?
Hello, yes.
Yeah, okay. Hi, I'm Balaji. I'm working as a senior product developer in BMC, and in HDM product, I'm working around 5+ years. So it's my overall experience in working in R&D department.
Wonderful, thank you. And Vedant, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi all. I'm Vedant, working in the SDM team. I recently joined actually in the BMC. So I'm currently having 2+ years in working in the BMC. So currently working in the R&D teams.
Wonderful. So as you can see, everyone, we have a lot of experience here from product to development and also support. So that makes up our panel. So I'd like to just reframe again where we are with these type of sessions. If you do have any questions, please put them into the Q&A section or raise your hands. I think a good segue to start with, Smita, because you've been working with me for the last few months on content. Can we just recap some of the content you've produced and experience just in general that maybe will be quite useful for customers?
Yeah, sure, Sam. So with the recent HTM webinar series that we did, two of the major topics that we covered, one of that was the best practices on using the Helix Data Manager tool. So in this webinar, you will get to know what are the recommendations on dealing with migration pack, when you are working with your customization, what are the standard best practices we recommend you to consider and introduce those in building a migration pack. I also covered about the different migration packs associated to different applications in it. And in the end, we did discuss about how to handle some of the data mapping related issues, which is another a common topic which comes across whenever we deal with migration packs. There are also some best practices on utilizing utilities. Some of the good and recent utilities that came up which will help you to manage your customization is the workflow migration utility. Then the deploy manager console, which is a known UI, which is used to build and migrate your customization from one environment to another. And then also the workflow migration utility, which is something we have started to introduce from 22.x version, which I believe in today's session, Murli will give us a short introduction and overview on what are the best things about this utility is. Now, some of the questions, I don't want to go through the whole list, but few of the questions which came up as part of the best practice webinar were, one of the question was related to the licensing question. So what is the version of the HTM tool from where we stop applying the HTM licenses when we are installing the HTM tool? So from the version 21.305 is when you can simply download and run the installer of the HTM, and that will take care of getting the license applied automatically. So we do not have a requirement to apply the license explicitly from this version onwards. One of the other question was regarding smart ID migration. So in your source and target system, when you register your ITSM application, if you plan to migrate your smart ID data, you need to register that as a separate source and target system. So there will be an individual entry for smart ID application, which you will register for your source and target system. You will build a separate migration pack utilizing the smart ID forms in order to migrate the data. Now, another interesting question that came up was the difference between migrating with the workflow migration utility and the manual method. So I would like to ask if Murli can pitch in here and give us a small overview on the workflow migration utility, please.
Hey, thanks, Meta. So just to give you some heads up, so we released kind of 4 utilities, to be honest, recently. So I would say 3 maybe, right? So you guys are aware of the HTM tool already, which is our data migration tool, and also we have the DWP export import utility specifically for DWP. On top of that, mainly for your prerequisites, for if I want to say that. So these two tools are heavily on data, right? So how do BMC help you to bring in your customizations and reconcile and all that good stuff? So some of these utilities have been used in our SaaS environments, at least for a couple of years now. So we basically, let me share my screen here. Is it okay, Smith? I'll just steal your screen for a couple of minutes.
I think it's still my screen.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Take it.
No worries. Let me see if I can bring it up here.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me know if you can see it.
Yes, but if you're on the other screen, if you can put it into the presenter, that's it.
Yeah.
Is
Perfect.
it better now? Okay, so the workflow migration utility. So there's a link here, so it's available to be down. It's downloadable by our EPD. So the expectation is you download it in your dedicated tools server, and then what this utility is capable of doing, especially it supports any versions from 2002 onwards. So if you have 2002 version on your on-premises, you want to migrate to the cloud environment, cloud versions, you could use this utility. It basically does 12 steps, and you can do everything together. So you can either run it individually and say, hey, run step 1, 2, 3, and you can validate it individually. Or if you're comfortable, you can run it together. So there are instructions in the document that will allow you to give you an example of how you can run it individually or how you can run it in bulk, right? So what it basically does is it checks your source version, which is 2002, right? And it's capable of doing both AR objects and CMDB objects, right? With CMDB, it does something called a snapshot. It takes a snapshot from your current CMDB setup, and also takes a snapshots on the target, and it compares, and it basically brings in your attributes and the classes, right? Wherein for the AR objects, it basically brings in all the overlays and custom objects, right? That's what basically it does. So it has it does it in the sequence, right? It migrates the permissions first, then it migrates your CMDB customizations, and it basically does a validation of your CMDB customization, saying that hey, all your classes and attributes are in already migrated, kind of thing, right? Then it also gives you some information about any missing base objects, right? So that means you need to take some action on those. It gives you some output, so you can work on those. Then it basically exports your overlays, and you exports your custom objects, and it migrates them. And also it does something called rebuild unions, things like that. So if something is missed with your custom views and whatnot, it helps with that. And then it also runs the sync asset utility with, for example, if it brings in some classes and attributes and it's not synced up with the asset module, it does it too. And finally, what it does is it runs something called an auto reconciliation. It's a separate tool, but it basically triggers that. What this helps is, so for example, today you have an overlay on a base form wherein you have 2 fields which you basically overlaid, and maybe 3 fields you overlaid, but then you didn't touch anything on the 3rd field. But BMC made a change on the base layer for that field. So that field will get auto reconciled. You don't have to reconcile it, right? So that's exactly what the auto reconciliation will do. So it'll reconcile any objects which were touched by BMC, even though you have an overlay object. So it'll reconcile that. It'll do two great tasks. It'll not only auto reconcile what is changed by BMC, plus it'll give you an output list of the object which you need to manually reconcile. So basically today, if you go to Developer Studio and if you perform a 3-way reconciliation, for example, you will be connecting to the source or a def file from the source. You'll be connecting to the target. You'll be comparing the base and the 2 overlays, right? And you'll be going through each one of those objects to reconcile. Here, this tool will give you an output of the ones you need to manually reconcile. So it basically tells you that even though when you wanted to manually reconcile, you have like 200 objects, but this tool will tell you, you know what, I auto reconcile some of these, and this is the list for you to manually reconcile. So, and also the Developer Studio, you should be able to open that and see that. So basically what it'll do is, so it'll provide an XML file, and that XML file will be available as part of your workspace folder. And then what you do is when you navigate to the Developer Studio, you choose Recon applications. You'll see an application called Recon application. You select that, and then you will find the objects to reconcile. So instead of you trying to manually pick all those things to reconcile, you can use this report. Again, if you use the auto reconciliation utility prior to this, then you could leverage this XML file to do your reconciliation. Otherwise, you can still do it in the old way where you can do your 3-way reconciliation with all the objects you discover, right? Since I'm here, is it okay, Nisha, I can cover one more tool which is also important, which you released which basically we call it our license conversion tool. I want to just talk about it a quick. So the one more tool we released was the license conversion utility. Just want to give you the quick brief on that. So this is basically if you're in your 2002 versions, you basically will have your classic licenses, right? So this tool gives you the ability to convert your classic license to the bundle licenses you would have purchased on the cloud environment, right? So it has a two-step process. You basically run this utility before you start any migration with your current production, on your current production. So it does something called a compliance check, right? It'll say you had purchased, you have all these users with all these licenses. It'll get you a report and say it'll also try to identify, help you identify any offline users who you have added the licenses, things like that. So it basically gives you a compliance report to say you have so many fixed licenses, floating licenses, and you have purchased the X number of bundle licenses, and are you compliant, non-compliant? And it'll also recommend you to buy like 10% more, 5% more, whatever, so that you can be compliant even when you have new users coming in and whatnot, right? So it does two phases. You can run the license conversion utility in assessment mode, which will basically generates a report, as I told you, and you can check your compliance. And then later, after you use HTM to migrate the data, right? So that's the reason I wanted to cover this on this Q&A, because this is an important tool you'll be running after each of your HTM migrations, right? So after you run your full HTM migration, we want you to run this utility because HTM would have brought in your people profile as classic, right? And you would have already purchased bundle licenses. What this utility will do is, as a post HTM activity, we want you to run this utility in conversion mode so that it converts all your people profile from classics to bundle, right? And then you can validate it. And let's say after a while you're running the HTM for an incremental run or even the go live. Every time you run data migration, whether it's full migration or delta migration, we want you to run this utility so that your people profiles are in compliance. So I think that's what I wanted to cover. Again, if you have any questions, you can always reach us to us, and I'll ensure that all these three utilities, the workflow migration, the auto recon, and the license conversion utility links, I'll make sure that's available once we send this Q&A outcome, right?
So one of the question that came up in the chat is related to creating the HDM database integration. So this is one of the important steps, and there are actually two possible ways on why you need to create the database integration. So whenever you register your source or target system, the initial details that you provide is your environmental information. So you will define the type of the system, the server you are using, the version of the ARS that you will be that your source system is on, and then your basic server information. Now, when you feed this to the HDM, in order to get this HDM database user created on your source or target system, you will have to create this HDM database integration. Now, on this step, one of the things it's going to ask you is to provide the system administrator user information here. Now, this is your, in simple term, your database super user who will allow to create the HDM DB user under the same schema table. So here you will need to provide your system administrator. So in this example, I have my SQL server. So I put in my SA user credential and then the HDM user password, which I created on my previous screen back here, and then run the create database integration. So this is going to actually execute a bunch of scripts. I believe there are 3 to 4 scripts. After which, when you log into the database and under your AR system database, you will be able to see the HDM DB user created under HDM and public schema. So now you have the HDM user with all the required privileges and roles so that you can actually run the migration job activity where you will be reading and writing from the database. So that's one of the major reasons for the integration. Now, as I'm on this screen, one thing I do want to bring up is when I register my smart IT source and target system. So one of the major difference in ITSM and smart IT is actually the type that you select. So whenever you are selecting smart IT, you need to select the type as relational database so that it is considered as an individual entry other than your ITSM, which will be considered here as a type remedy. Other than these, if you're using DWP application, for that migration, you will select the type as DWPC and then so on based upon your option. Another important thing to highlight here, because we see some of the common issues with the data discovery being empty, or you're trying to run a data discovery job, which shows successful, but there are no list of forms and fields displayed in the data discovery. One of the common reasons for that could be the ARS version. So always make sure when you register your source and target system, you're selecting the correct ARS version. Now, if there is a specific version you do not find available here, then try to find the one that's next closest available. So you can see we have like versions from 7x, 9.1 to our latest 21.3 as well. So this step does matter and is important when you create and move forward on the next steps. One of the question that came up in the best practices webinar was related to how to handle your customization with building with the migration pack. I want to ask if Ollie, you want to give us a little bit of an introduction on what is the best way if I want to add my custom forms into the migration packs. What are the standard recommendations we have migrating the data for it?
Thanks, Smita. While we're on this screen, Diane's question that you just answered also had a specific point about the location. As you see on your screen there at the moment, you've got your location, and he was asking about remote. So we've got two options under the location. You've got local and remote. The reason that we have that is local means that HDM can talk to the database. In a normal situation, if you're migrating on-prem to on-prem, you install HDM once, and it has a direct connection to the source and the target database simultaneously. So in that case, and usually you would set up your both your source and your target system as local, because you can have a direct connection to the database. The reason we have remote is where we're using two HDM instances. So if, for example, we're migrating from on-prem to the cloud, and we can't talk to the target database across the internet effectively, we have two HDM instances. We discover the source database on the source HDM instance and the target database on the target database instance. But to work, HDM needs to know what the source and target both look like simultaneously. So when we're in this situation, what we do is we discover the target system data dictionary on the target HDM instance. We can export that data dictionary and move it to the source system, and then we create a stub source system in our source HDM instance. So we have both source and target. Because target doesn't have a direct connection to the cloud, to the SaaS environment, we set it as a remote system, but we link the data dictionary that we've discovered on the target to that source HDM instance. So the source system knows what both the source and target database looks like, even though we don't have a direct connection. So using that location as remote is a way for us to say, this is a stub, I can't talk to the database, but here is the data dictionary and this is what it looks like, so we don't need to discover it. So that's just to answer the question that Diane had about what is the remote location for. I hope that makes sense to people.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Oli, for that answer. Yeah, actually, my question was like, if you configure a system as a remote, okay, and So what it does is when you configure the system as a remote, it will not give us an option to set up the database connections, right? So what happens if you configure the system as a remote, and if you go to the action menu, okay, then there is an option to create HDM integration as well for the remote machines. So what is the exactly use of that action for remote systems?
There is no valid value in doing that. There is no connection. You wouldn't do that. So if you set up a remote system, all you'd do is you'd enable it for data migration. You'd get the DB collation string, which you'd need to copy that from the source from the remote system and just manually enter whether it's UTF-8 or SQL Latin 1, whatever like that. But you can't create a database integration because we don't have a direct database connection.
And I just pasted your link, Dinesh. It's all covered. So if you don't mind, I can share my screen. Let's just 2 minutes if you don't mind, Smita. So I just want to showcase
So
this.
that option should be grayed out, right, for the remote systems?
Now, if you see here, we have a step-by-step section here. So for example, it says, right, to discover on-prem or to describe remote, right? So this is what you do first, right? You basically set it. Okay, where is it? So you basically, hopefully this is covering that. This is this is discovering your dictionaries, right? Yeah. So this is
could just be grayed out the option. But
correct. So you do the target.
It's not valid. If you try and use it, it won't work.
Obviously. Yeah, I mean these steps I know, like when we migrate on-prem to SaaS, that I know. Yeah. The thing is, the option should be grayed out for the remote systems, I believe, in the tool itself. Because if you do create database integration for remote system, that doesn't make any sense, right? So that option should be grayed out when your configure system as a remote.
Okay, but if you're following this, then we won't be able to worry about it, right? So we say permanently. So basically, we talk about basically setting it as remote, right? And then copying the files, right? So that's basically what we say, right? And then you discover and then check the fields, and then we say copy the files over. So aren't we saying that?
Yeah, this is for your mapping your dictionary to your remote system. Yeah, that's
you do the discovery separately, and then you copy over the files, which is exactly what Ali was saying. I just want to share you that space. Cool.
I think it's something that we could add as an enhancement, Dan. It is valid that the option is either removed or grayed out, but that's not the way it is at the moment.
Yeah, but even in on-premise, what I've seen is even with the cloud, they still have two systems, right? So kind of keeping it open is okay because we do not know what they're going to do. But again, I get it. It's something we can make it a little bit better. We can.
Yeah, and there's one more thing while we are on this screen itself. Yeah, so what we do is generally we configure the system and then we provide this HDM user and the password, right? And then we go to the action menu and then create this HDM database integration. Okay. So the password that you provide on the screen, the first screen, and the password that you provide on that database integration screen, the system doesn't match both the passwords. So the password that you use on the first screen could be different, the password that you'll be using on the second screen. So that check is not there, I believe, in HDM.
What you enter as the password in the system information is the password that HDM will use to connect to the database when you make a call to the database. The one that's entered in the dialog is the one that is going to be used when you create the HDM user. If they don't match, then when you try and use the system, it will fail. So I always set them to the same value. But the one, if you use a different one in the dialog to create the database integration, then you need to make sure that the one in the system definition is matching.
Yeah, I mean, my question is like, there should be check in a system in the tool itself, like. I mean, if you can, share the screen, configure the system on the HDM.
Yeah, let me reshare my screen real quick. Yeah, I think.
Yeah. So here itself, if you edit this record, yeah, and this HDM password, yeah. So let's suppose you have added here as XYZ123, okay, and you save this record, okay. Now what you do next step is action and then create HDM database integration, okay. Now here. On this screen, the HDM user password that you are entering here, this could be ABC123, okay? And it accepts, and what it does is it creates this HDM user with this password that you are entering here on the screen. So there is no check, okay, in the system, right? It will check the password that is entered on the previous screen with this particular screen.
Yeah, that's that's the way it behaves. That's intended. But again,
So it's
potentially
confusing for the users.
there's scope for validation there, but that's currently not the way that it works. When you create the definition and create the database integration, I always just use the same password. That's just the way that it's been designed. But I agree that there's probably scope for additional validation there as an enhancement.
Yeah, I thought of sharing this because recently I got to know this thing. Okay, when I was trying to configure the system and it was accepting the different password itself. So thought of sharing it. Okay, yeah, thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you. Now, I think one of the most interesting question we always get, and which I see in the chat, is related to ARS up and running. Is it a requirement if you are running your DWPC migration? So I'm assuming your ITSM migration is completed, and now you're trying to do your DWPC migration. And the question is if we should have the ARS still down until you complete the migration activity, or is it okay to turn it on while we do the DWPC?
Always better to have systems shut down when you're doing data migration. That is the way. Usually when you're performing a migration from your source system, you're working from a copy of production, which is just a database copy. There wouldn't be a remedy stack attached to it. There wouldn't be an ARS stack attached to it anyway. If you're migrating directly from the live database on the source, that is, of course, an additional risk. There's going to be a performance impact, and the source data will change a little bit. In terms of source, it's not the end of the world if ARS is still running, but we would strongly recommend that you shut down ARS when you're performing any kind of migration. On the target for import, ARS should always be shut down. You should never migrate into a live system. From the source, it doesn't matter quite as much. And obviously, when you're going live, you want to shut it down because you don't want any tickets to be created or changed after you've exported that data.
Yeah.
So if you're migrating from a copy, it's already shut down effectively. If you're exporting from the live system and you don't have a maintenance window that allows you to shut down, it is possible to do so, but the export will be slower and there could be an impact on users on that production system. So we would always recommend shutting it down.
Yeah.
And also
I'd like to add one thing real quick is for the target, it's recommended that you finish all your migration activity for the different applications. So assuming you will do ITSM, Smart IT, DWPC, finish all those activity and then plan to bring the system up, but that too in a quiet mode or a silent mode, so that you do not have the processes, the default admin processes running in the background when the system is coming up. So it's always recommended to not bring the system partially up when you are in between your migration steps. So yeah.
That's exactly what I wanted to add to exactly. So you make sure, in fact, we also tell you to even take a backup, to be honest, right? So you complete the data migration for ITSM and you do the form cons validation, everything looks good. You can either do the post migration there, right? Or you could continue with the rest of the migration and do all the post migration together and then take another backup. So we recommend you taking a backup after each data migration so that something goes wrong, you can always go back to ITSM instead of going back all the way, right? So a lot of pluses and to do it this way, which we recommend as best practices. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. So sorry, Smita. I see there's one question from Andreas. I just thought that probably that was a question, probably just rolled over and we couldn't have a look at it. But I would love to talk about this question related to Andreas asking if there are any updates and alternative for the link he has provided. So I would like to say that this is an idea. I see that this is being shared somewhere in 2022 after something that I wasn't aware of, or maybe I've never seen, but I can tell that I did read it and I could see two parts to it. One is if you're looking out for an option to migrate data from one environment to another, when you say the idea is to have similar data on dev or test. So if that is the case, then I would like to inform you with this. our latest ITSM on-prem version 23.301. This is a capability that we have bought with our release, wherein on a containerized solution, you can have a DB refresh pipeline for Postgres database as of this with this version, wherein you can migrate your data or refresh your data from dev to QA to prod or prod to QA to dev, vice versa, so that the whole steps of the rigorous process you don't have to repeat in each and every environment. And second is probably about the data security, wherein you say that both GDPR and DSGVO general guidelines that mandate and secure the data. So I'm just probably thinking out loud about it, but is it about a requirement to encrypt data in transit within the Kubernetes cluster or so? If I read that rightly, then I would like to tell you with our upcoming versions, which is ITSM version, which is slated for somewhere in August, we do have a feature that we would bring wherein we will have service mesh that brings in end-to-end encryption. Please put it in the chat if I could answer your question. All right.
I think Andreas has come off mute. Hi, Andreas.
Hey guys.
Hello.
So, so for your first part, you were talking about
a DB refresh pipeline.
Oh yeah. DB refresh. I mean, we have been doing a couple of DB refresh. I mean, DB refresh are, at least for me, they are nothing new. We've been doing a couple of DB refresh from dev to prod, from prod to dev, from prod to other environments. So this is I mean, this is pretty much standard from my perspective. When you go in the cloud with BMC, then you kind of just get this feature out of the box.
This is yes, exactly. So we had it, but this feature as I was talking about was for on-premise versions, which we never had, and we released the support for Postgres.
Oh yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And for the second part, I mean, for me, this idea is really about being able to sync data into another environment while like cleaning it up as good as possible. So you kind of check those regulatory boxes where it says you're not allowed to have production data in a non-production system. So this is, for me, this is really the core of this idea, to like clean it up as good as possible, because there is no, I mean, like the PDP tool really doesn't scale, and so this idea is really about having a way to create a non-prod system with production data, because the reason is really because if you want to run tests and so on, it is still nice to have production data in a non-production system. It just needs to be somehow modified so you don't have production data in your non-production system. That's kind of the challenge here.
All right.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Murli, go ahead.
Yeah. So today we have this covered in our process, right? So if you look, I don't know if you're done, we have a process documentation out there for on-prem container and migration. So where we have emphasized of DB backups and in different stages. Say, for example, let's say you deploy in your container deployment on dev, QA, and prod, right? And then let's say you create your foundation data, your basics, right? So we request you to take a backup at that stage. So this way, because anything cleaning up, right? So as long as if BMC comes up with the tool which we maintain at every release, saying that with all the products we have, all the services we have, cleaning up based on a company or whatever transactional data, it's something we don't. In fact, as you know, as a company, we don't do hard deletes, right? So end of the day, cleaning up is a different process. Rather, we want you to think a little bit differently, wherein you have those backups before data, right? And also with the data you need with the foundation data, whatever. So take the backups and then restore that to your low environment. So this way you don't have to do any cleanup. So that's how we have defined the process. And also we recommend you to take anything new development you do as deployment packages. So there's a lot of ways to get where you want and not necessarily a cleanup, which is what we're kind of against about cleaning up, because there's no easy way to maintain everything and say thumbs up, hey, we cleaned everything, you go ahead, right? So just want to put that in your mind that we don't necessarily go for cleanup kind of feature or something unless it's a really unavoidable solution, where in these way of processes for you, where you can have your backups taken at the right time and packages taken at the right time, you can go back to without any transactional data. So it'll still help you for your situation as well, how we put our process together. Hope that helps.
I mean, I guess partly. I guess we will see if there, I don't know if there's any customer coming forward with, like, if I don't know if there's like a joint venture with BMC or something like that, which could lead to something which is asked in this idea. I guess we will have to see if something like this happens, because other than that, I don't really see something like this happening in the near future.
Also, Andreas, I'm gonna review this page and the idea with internally within my team, and hopefully if there are any progress, I'll update the page as well on what is the decision taken, or what is our take on it. All right.
That would be great. Thank you.
And Andrew, just to add on, right? Situation. So some customers will say, I don't want any transactional data. Some customers will say, I just want to mask the people profile, like phone numbers and whatnot, right? So those something they basically create the scripts and mask those, kind of make it read only or mask those. So there are different ways again. So depending on what exactly you need, we can give like solutions which will work right away, right? Just to keep that in your mind as well, right? There are different possibility to solutionize these.
Yeah, sure. Every customer is pretty much different, and you can't really create one fits all.
That's why we don't give any delete button, because we are always scared about giving a delete button.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andreas, for your question. Conscious we've got 15 minutes. I know we've got another question in the chat. So Vessel, I saw you had a question, and Balaji, I can see you're responding to it. So I don't know, Balaji, if you want to take that live and then post the update after.
Yes, I can answer now.
Thank you.
That looks to be some permission issue. Maybe we need to review the privileges that HDM user has. So that looks to be some permission related issue. Logan, does that answer your question?
Vessel, can you hear us?
Can you hear me right now?
Yes, hello.
Okay, hello. I think my question is, when we are trying to discover data dictionary from our database, by the way, our database is using MS SQL, we are getting error about invalid column name schema ID, but in the other hand, we are running the case with BMC. Should I wait the answer, or I'm just wondering about, does anyone know about this error, or I can wait the case solution?
Yeah, that looks to be mostly a permission kind of issue. Did we validate that HDM user has sufficient privilege to access all the columns? Like you're getting some error, right? Column name schema ID doesn't exist. So
yeah.
Maybe we need to review the privileges that HDM user has, and if needed, maybe you can drop the HDM user and recreate the HDM user through that create HDM database integration option, right?
Okay. Okay.
You
And-
got that right. So basically, make sure that so what do we call it, Smita? Like, does HTTP have like all the admin privileges, super admin privilege, something like that, right? Super user or something? Or?
Yes, so I'm sharing my screen, and actually this question does come up a lot of times. So one important thing we want to confirm is how did the HTM DB user was created? Did you run the database integration, or did you run the manual scripts? Because sometimes it happens that the HTM user does not have all the required list of privileges and roles. So I'm just sharing my screen, and we have this documentation based upon the database type you are on. So for MS SQL, we have a requirement to have these specific database role to be added. If you do that database integration, it's going to take care of adding this by default. So you should do a check for sure to see if the HTM DB user has the set of roles.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So if you log into the SQL developer or whatever you use, right? When you go to the user, it'll show all its privileges. You can even take a screenshot also and send it to the case. If you have a case, we can double check. But yeah, as Smita said, see if you can check if these permissions and roles are there. Hopefully they should unblock you.
Okay.
Now, I don't see any questions in the chat, but I do like to take another question which came up as part of the troubleshooting webinar. So this is again a common use case where there is a migration job that was executed and it failed for some reason. So let's say it had 10 forms, and out of which 3 or 4 of the forms failed to do the data export or import, and the job is now failed. So what is the recommendation, how to move forward from this step? So the important thing that we should notice, so I'm sharing here, and I think I do have maybe a smart IT pack example. Let me see, give me 1 second. So yes, let's look at this example here. So here you can see this is my 2002 to 21.3 migration, ITSM migration job. And I did cancel this, but that was a reason because I can see it was failing on a bunch of the form with some dedicated error message. Now, the recommendation in a case your job has failed, you should check under the action if it is giving you the option to re-import just the failed jobs, so it's just the failed forms. Now, in some cases, we do not see this option. We see that the job is actually completed despite of having some forms which fail to do the data export or import. So in this case, we recommend you to troubleshoot and debug, find out the reason why the job failed, fix the data, and create a new job. Do not modify or do anything with this failed job, but go ahead and create a new job associated to those failed objects, and then run the migration dedicatedly for those list of forms. So you will get this option if HDM tool is able to analyze and give you the opportunity to just re-import the failed one, again, after you have fixed the issue or debug the issue why the last failure happened. So I just thought to share this one real quick.
And to just
Mhm.
so Smita, you also want to cover that, as you said, even if it's fail half, if they create a new job and re-import, the data should be fine because we just overwrite and everything should be
Correct.
fine.
Yes, we overwrite. So it is not going to bother whatever the last data import was successfully able to complete. It's going to pick up from the last step it failed.
Couple of extra things to note as well. So this is an import job. So Smita, if you click in the top right of your screen to take you up to the migration job, if you need to re-import data, the export's already complete, you can re-import data. And if you don't have the option to re-import failed, you can click on the plus button on the left-hand side here, and that will effectively create a new dialog for you to go through, a new wizard to go through and create a new import job, and you can choose which forms. You can exclude the ones that have succeeded and just import the ones that failed. So on import, as long as you've got your export package, you can always re-import the data multiple times, so you don't need to keep exporting the data again. If the
Good point. Yeah.
Process failed on export, then that job is effectively null and void. You need to resolve whatever has caused the export failure and then create a new job. There's no option to re-export data that's failed. So it's kind of a nuance there. So if an export fails, create a new job. If an import fails, resolve the issues. It might be duplicates, it might be field length, or you might need to do a transform, but you can recreate the import without having to do the export again, which is very useful if you're migrating to the cloud, so you don't have to move data across the network again.
Great point. Thanks for adding that, Ollie. Thank you. Now, one of the other question I do like to discuss is regarding what are the standards we have or the recommendation we have so that we do not see the general performance issue on running the data import or export. So I believe there's always a recommendation that comes up is how you should set up your HDM dedicated server on your source and target system. So we do recommend that this server, the virtual machine or the physical machine, which you are using for your data migration, is dedicatedly available only to run the migration activity. Do not have your ITSM, do not have your user activity interference on that server machine because it is going to consume the load. We already have some fine-tuning recommendation on what should be the infrastructure like a RAM and CPU, the minimum requirement. But again, you may have to increase or adjust your disk space or RAM if your machine needs that requirement. So it's a good practice to not have too much crowded, unnecessary development job done on those servers, but use them dedicatedly for our HDM migration activity. Muli, Ollie, do you guys want to add up anything on that?
It's just, that's very good practice. We have seen customers with poor performance before, and when we've checked their server, they've installed HDM on a staging box that has 30 other users, and that's the cause of their performance. HDM will basically use as much resources as it can get. If other things are running on that server, it has less to work with. So a dedicated VM that only has HDM running on is always going to improve your performance. And there are various other things as well, making sure that you've got a fast connection to your source and target database, making sure that your file system is readily accessible and on a fast disk, for example. So an SSD is going to be faster than a slow magnetic disk. There's many performance tuning elements, but giving your VM plenty of resources is one of the key items.
Cool, thank you. One of the last thing, as I don't see any questions in the chat, is we do have this a video library. So it's a master library that is created. Let me quickly reshare. So this is a knowledge article, and again, we will be sharing the link. Sam will share that across. So this knowledge article has a list of all of the top how-to videos, which covers all the detailed steps you will be covering or performing when running an end-to-end migration job. So far, we have built up like 18 to 19 videos in this knowledge article. Most of them are dedicatedly for ITSM application, and we are continuing to add up more videos which will help you guide if you're following the documentation. It inclines with the steps from the document, and then it will give you a good idea on what all steps you should be covering when performing the activity. So do review the knowledge article. We're going to keep updating this as and when more video topics come up to the plate.